Hello, everyone. Welcome to this program of the Learning Center here at Senior Citizens Incorporated. Just in case we haven't met, I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Roger Smith, director of the program, and I see a number of familiar faces, people who are frequently at Learning Center programs, but I see a lot of visitors as well. So I hope that if you are here for the very first time, that you feel a particular sense of warmth and welcome around you. This really is a community of learners, and we want you to feel attached to that, whether this will be the only time you'll be with us or the first of many times that you will be with us. Now that you've discovered where we hide the parking lot and the front door, you are all set to go. And believe me when I tell you that there are people whose cars turn automatically onto Jasper Street without their having to do anything. There's a great deal of faithfulness among our members, and I would certainly welcome you to investigate the programs of TLC and the other things that we have going on at Senior Citizens Incorporated. People sometimes ask, or they tell me that they don't think that they're old enough to take Learning Center programming at Senior Citizens Inc. And my answer, and this is the truth, we haven't carded anybody yet. So if your time and inclination lead you to Learning Center programming, please know that you will be received very warmly. A very quick couple of thank yous to partner organizations. First of all, ASALH, which is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. This is a very austere and historic organization of which Savannah plays a part with the Savannah Yamacraw branch of this very historic organization. And ASALH and the Learning Center met each other some 5 or 6 years ago, I would say, and the romance has been sustained. And it's a relationship that we definitely value. And in fact, Wanda Lloyd, who is affiliated with ASALH, is the reason that we learned about this kind of a banned books program in the first place. So in a very real sense, without ASALH and without our great friend Wanda Lloyd, we might not be here for this program tonight. And I'm so proud that this is the 3rd year. And this is something that we recognized in year 1 that creates a certain kind of, I don't know, certain kind of electricity in the room. There's something that, I don't know, it adds up to more than just the sum of its parts. The 8 folks who will be reading tonight and what they will share, what we will share with you ends up being pretty exciting. I also want to say thank you to the Savannah Black Heritage Festival, who are kind enough to include this event in their listings for the entire festival, and their executive director is here. She's going to be one of our readers this evening, so you will meet her in a very, very short amount of time. I've already referenced Wanda Lloyd, and I'm going to invite her to come forward, take the microphone, and she's going to introduce all 8 of our readers at one time so we minimize the popping up and down, back and forth, and then we'll get right into the reading. Wanda Lloyd, thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you. It's so good to see a full room again. We really, we love seeing that. We started this 3 years ago, as Roger said, when some of us, members of ASALH, went to the national conference of ASALH in Jacksonville, and they had a banned book reading in a park. And we thought, we could do this. We got a room. So, so thank you, Roger, and the Learning Center for the room. Because
Let's put on a show.
Exactly. You want to stand or you're going to?
I'm just going to cross over.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'm standing here because y'all know I'm crippled these days, so it's hard to climb up there without Roger's help. I wanted to thank all the readers, those we called on to read this year. And last year at the end of the program, Teresa Michelle came up to me as director of the Savannah Black Heritage Festival. She said, I want to read next year, so thank you. That's all it takes. Just come up to one of us and say, I want to read next year. Our readers in order, and Roger has the clicker, and he's going to put your book cover on the screen, and when you see your book cover, it's time to go. We start with Reverend Guillermo Arboleda, who is missioner of the Episcopal Diocese of Georgia's Racial Justice Mission. Next is Dr. Bruce Cohen, epidemiologist, retired. Lola DeWitt, who is director of Live Oak Public Libraries. Teresa Michelle Jackson, director, Savannah Black Heritage Festival. Rexanna Lester, who is one of my best friends in the world, and her name is spelled wrong in the catalog, so I'm so sorry. And she's executive former executive editor, retired, of the Savannah Morning News. Roger Smith, director of the Learning Center. Melissa Swindell, who is a fast friend from the last few years. I've been going back and forth around the state following Melissa and doing things with her. She's director of the Georgia Writers Museum, and she'll be speaking tomorrow at 12 o'clock. So please come back and hear more about Georgia writers. And Andrea Wardlow, who's director of the Walter and Linda Evans Center for African American Studies at SCAD. And so, Reverend Arboleda, we will start with you.
Good evening. My name is Guillermo Arboleda. I was born and raised in New York City area, outside of New York City, the child of immigrants from Ecuador, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, but raised in this country and educated in this country in public schools. And when I picked up this book for the first time in 2020, I thought I knew what racism was, and I was wrong. Stamped from the beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America by Ibram X. Kendi is a tome. It's about 600 pages, 700 pages. But it's worth every page, and it's rather accessible for a big, long book. Dr. Kendi is better known for another book called How to Be Anti-Racist, which is a bit more personal narrative. This is in his wheelhouse as a historian, talking about the history of racist ideas. And for me, what this book did was kind of diagnose how we landed where we are with many streams of thought in our culture. And the biggest takeaway I would say this book gave to me is that a couple things. One, that alongside the history of anti-racist progress, a narrative that I grew up hearing a lot about in the 90s and 2000s, and 2010s even, there has been a steady history of racist progress, and they've been moving in parallel for most of American history, which is why you have things like ups and downs within civil rights from about the Civil War on, but though there's a history from the colonial days that parallels that as well. So there's just been a lot of back and forth with the way that civil rights go in this country for black folks, but for people of all racial minorities. The second major thing that this book taught me was about different kinds of racism. So the book weaves through three major categories: the anti-racist, who believes that people are totally equal across all categories, which I would say that most people think they are, and that I thought I was before reading this book. And then there's the what they call the segregationist, or the biological racists. People of non-white races are inferior to white people, right? Black folks, indigenous folks, Asian folks, etc. We all know what that is, right? And then there's the cultural racists, or the behavioral racists. That's what he calls assimilationists. People who say, well, yeah, black people could be equal if they acted like white people. Latino people could be equal if they acted like white people. Asian people could be equal if they acted like white people. That's putting it really simply, but that's really the thrust of the book, right? So I'm gonna read an excerpt that it's from the prologue. It gives an overview of the way the book goes, and essentially the book walks through the history of the United States dating back to the colonial era through the lens of 5 major figures, and he's gonna introduce those 5 figures in this section. It's a page and a half, and that'll give you an arc of where the book's going. I hope I have enough time, and you just start playing the music to walk me off stage if I go too long. Stamped from the Beginning narrates the entire history of racist ideas, from their origins in the 15th century Europe through colonial times, when the early British settlers carried racist ideas to America, all the way to the 21st century and current debates about the events taking place on our streets. 5 main characters in particular will serve as our tour guides as we explore the landscape of racial ideas through 5 periods in American history. During America's first century, racist theological ideas were absolutely critical to sanctioning the growth of American slavery and making it acceptable to the Christian churches. This is where my interests intersect, aren't they? These ideas were featured in the sermons of early America's greatest preacher and intellectual, Boston divine Cotton Mather, who lived from 1663 to 1728, our first tour guide. Cotton Mather was the namesake and grandson of two of New England's intellectual trailblazers, John Cotton and Richard Mather, Puritan preachers who helped carry 200-year-old racist ideas from Europe across the Atlantic Ocean. To substantiate American slavery and win converts, Cotton Mather preached racial inequality in body while insisting that the dark soul of enslaved Africans would become white when they became Christians. His writings and sermons were widely read in the colonies and in Europe, where the progenitors of the scientific revolution and then the Enlightenment were racializing and whitening Europeans' freedom, civilization, rationality, and beauty. During the American Revolution and thereafter, years that saw the stunning growth of American slavery, politicians and secular intellectuals joined slavery's justifying fray. These justifiers included one of the most powerful politicians and secular intellectuals of the new United States, our second tour guide, the anti-slavery, anti-abolitionist, Thomas Jefferson, 1743 to 1826. Jefferson died on the eve of the 19th century's movement for emancipation and civil rights, a movement partially spearheaded by the pulsating editor of The Liberator, William Lloyd Garrison, tour guide number 3. Like his peers, Garrison's most instrumentally passionate anti-slavery ideas drawing Americans to the cause of abolition and civil rights were usually not anti-racist ideas. He popularized the assimilationist idea that slavery, or racial discrimination more broadly, had imbruted Black people. This oppression had made their cultures, psychologies, and behaviors inferior. It is one anti-racist thing to say discriminators treated Black people like they were barbarians. It is yet another racist thing to say the discrimination actually transformed Black people into barbarians. The nation's first great professionally trained Black scholar, W.E.B. Du Bois, 1868, get this, to 1963, it was a long life, our fourth tour guide, initially adopted Garrison's racist ideas. But he also stood at the forefront of anti-racist ideas, challenging Jim Crow's rise in the late 19th century. Over the course of his long and storied career into the 20th century, Du Bois's double consciousness of racist and anti-racist ideas amazingly transfigured into a single consciousness of anti-racism. In the process, however, his influence waned. In the 1950s and 1960s, racist arguments once again became the most influential ideas, drawing Americans to the cause of civil rights. Later, civil rights and Black power advances and the sensationalized crises of Black single-parent households and welfare queens, affirmative action, and violent rebels and criminals all fed a ravishing racist backlash to the racial progress of the 1960s, including the judicial persecution of anti-racist activists, most famously, a young philosopher from the University of California at Los Angeles. Exonerated of all capital charges in 1972, our fifth tour guide is Angela Davis, 1943 to present, who spent the next 4 decades opposing the racial discriminators who learned to hide their intent, denouncing those who promoted end of racism fairy tales, while advocating bipartisan tough-on-crime policies and a prison industrial complex that engineered the mass incarceration, beatings, and killings of Black people by law enforcement. These 5 characters, Cotton Mather, Thomas Jefferson, William Lloyd Garrison, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Angela Davis, were arguably the most consistently prominent and provocative racial theorists of their respective lifetimes, writing and speaking and teaching racial and non-racial ideas that were as fascinating as they were original, influential, and/or contradictory. But stamped from the beginning is not a set of 5 biographies of these people. Their complex lives and influential ideas have sat at the apex of debates between assimilationists and segregationists, between anti-racists and racists, and thus provide a window to those debates, to this intricately woven history. Thank you.
tough act to follow. Good evening, I'm Bruce Cohen, and the book I've selected...
Bruce, use the mic.
Sure. The book I've selected to share with you this evening is White Fragility. Why is it so hard for white people to talk about race? Written by Robin DiAngelo. This book has been extremely important for me in terms of how I think about race, how I talk about racism, and how I've been trying to become a better ally in the fight against racism. Shortly after this book was released in 2018, a group of us here in Savannah met in a Midtown coffee house to form a book discussion group to share our learning about this. I see some of the group members here today. One of the members who isn't here is Pat Stewart, a Black educator and activist who was a member of our group. Pat said many times when we looked at her for guidance and direction, "This is work you have to do. This is work you have to do. I've spent 70 years being asked by whites what to do, and now I'm done." So at the end of our first organizational meeting, there were several patrons who overheard our discussion and challenged us about why we were talking about race and how inappropriate it was to do so. I didn't realize at the time that this uncomfortable experience for me was in fact central to the themes of this book, and that I missed a real opportunity to engage and to confront these people. So I'd like to read a few excerpts that really resonated for me in this book that sort of explains the theory of white fragility. So Robin DiAngelo says, "White people in North America live in a society that is deeply separate and unequal by race, and white people are the beneficiaries of that separation and inequality. As a race, we are insulated from racial stress at the same time that we come to feel entitled to and deserving of our advantage. Given how seldom we experience racial discomfort in a society we dominate, we haven't had to build our racial stamina. Socialized into deep internalized sense of superiority that we are either unaware of or don't admit to ourselves, we become highly fragile in conversations about race. We consider a challenge to our racial worldviews as a challenge to our very identities as good moral people." She said that she conceptualizes this as white fragility. Though white fragility is triggered by discomfort and anxiety, it is born of superiority and entitlement. White fragility is not a weakness, but in fact, it's a powerful means of white racial control and protection of the status quo. Robin goes on to say, "This book is intended for us, white progressives, who so often, despite our conscious intentions, make life difficult for people of color." She says, "I believe that white progressives cause daily damage to people of color. I define a white progressive as any white person who thinks he or she is not racist or is less racist or in the choir who already gets it. White progressives can be the most difficult for people of color because to the degree that we think we've arrived, we will put our energy into making sure that others see that we've arrived, and none of our energy will go into what we really need to be doing for the rest of our lives, engaging in ongoing self-awareness, continuing education, relationship building, and actual anti-racist practice. White progressives do indeed uphold and perpetuate racism, but our defensiveness and certitude make it virtually impossible to explain to us how we go about doing that." So how does DiAngelo define the system of racism? When a racial group's collective prejudice is backed by the power of legal authority and institutional control, it is transformed into racism, a far-reaching system that functions independently from the intentions or self-images of individual actors. It becomes the default of the society and is reproduced automatically. Racism is a system. Racism is deeply embedded in the fabric of our society. It's not limited to a single act or a person. Individual whites may be against racism, but we continue to benefit from the system that privileges whites as a group. How does Robin DiAngelo talk about the importance of whites actually seeing race? I'm a white American raised in the United States. I have a white frame of reference and a white worldview, and I move through the world with a white experience. My experience is not a universal human experience. It is particularly white experience in a society in which race matters profoundly, a society that is deeply separate and unequal by race. However, like most white people raised in the U.S., I was not taught to see myself in racial terms, and certainly not to draw attention to my race or to behave as if it had mattered in any way. Of course, I was made aware that somebody's race mattered, and if race was to be discussed, it would be theirs, not mine. But my silence is not benign, because it protects and maintains the racial hierarchy and my place within it. People of color certainly experience this as a form of racism, wherein we fail to hold each other accountable, to challenge racism when we see it, or to support people of color in their struggle for racial justice. So DiAngelo goes on to describe many more aspects of white fragility and suggests ways that we can interrupt and address where we need to go from here. She concludes, discomfort is necessary for growth, while silence maintains the status quo. Interrupting racism takes courage and intentionality. The interruption is by definition not passive or complacent. And she ends up with, regardless of agreement or disagreement with the things I say in this book, the book has sparked widespread conversation about how we talk about race and how communities engage across difference. Thank you.
Good evening. So I printed out something that I wanted to share with you, and of course I left that in my office. The main thing I wanted to talk to you about before I started reading is there's a difference between banned and challenged books. So banned is when it is not allowed to be sold, not allowed to be published, not allowed for it to be seen. A challenged book means someone is objecting to what's in there and they're trying to get it to the status of being banned. So I just wanted to make that, explain that to you because, of course, libraries right now are on the forefront of this censorship battle. And I would be remiss if I did not make you aware of a current legislation, SB 74, that is right now being considered in the state of Georgia. So I would encourage you all to contact every single legislator, Senate and House, and tell them not to pass that, to vote no on it. Anyway, so the last time that this book was challenged or banned, was 2022. And the main reason this book is always coming up for being challenged or banned is for dangerous instances of sex and rape and misogyny. But it was interesting to me to read it because I was a church girl, and so I wanted to read what this pastor went through. And if you grew up in church, you know that, back in the day, if someone became pregnant, they would make her sit up in the front of the church, and she had to, pretty much confess her sins in front of the whole church. Like, it was extremely degrading. I don't know if churches still do that, but I know, I know the church I grew up in did do that, and I did not grow up in the South, so I should just let you know that. So, am I on the right page? I am not. Okay. He expected her to come up to him and ask for his help in something she was doing in the house. When she did not speak, he turned around. She was wearing a light cotton dress of light brown and dark brown squares, and her hair was braided tightly all around her head. She looked like a little girl, and he almost smiled. Then, "What's the matter?" he asked her, and felt the heart within him sicken. "Gabriel," she said, "I'm gonna have a baby." He stared at her. She began to cry. He put the 2 pails of water carefully on the ground. She put out her hands to reach him, but he moved away. "Girl, stop that bellering. What you talking about?" But having allowed her tears to begin, she could not stop them at once. She continued to cry, weaving a little where she stood and with her hands to her face. He looked in a panic around the yard and toward the house. "Stop that," he cried, not daring here and now to touch her. "And tell me what's the matter." "I told you. I done told you. I gonna have a baby." She looked at him, her face broken up and the hot tears falling. "It's the Lord's truth. I ain't making up no story. It's the Lord's truth." He could not take his eyes from her, though he hated what he saw. "And when you done found this out?" "Not so long. I thought maybe I was mistook. But ain't no mistake, Gabriel. What we gonna do?" Then as she watched his face, her tears began again. "Hush," he said with a calm that astonished him. "We going to do something. Just you be quiet." "What are we going to do, Gabriel? Tell me, what you are fixing in your mind to do?" "You go back on in the house. Ain't no way for us to talk now." "Gabriel, go on in the house, girl. Go on." And when she did not move but continued to stare at him, "We're going to talk about it tonight. We're going to get to the bottom of this tonight." She turned from him and started up the porch steps. "And dry your face," he whispered. She bent over, lifting the front of her dress to dry her eyes, and stood so for a moment on the bottom of the steps while he watched her. Then she straightened and walked into the house, not looking back. She was going to have his baby, while Deborah, despite their groaning, despite the humility with which she endured his body, yet failed to be quickened by any coming life. It was in the womb of Esther, who was no better than a harlot, that the seed of the prophet would be nourished. And he moved from the well, picking up, like a man in a trance, the heavy pails of water. He moved toward the house, which now, high gleaming roof and spun gold window, seemed to watch him and to listen. The very sun above his head and the earth beneath his feet had ceased their turning. The water, like a million warning voices, lapped in the buckets he carried on each side, and his mother, beneath the startled earth on which he moved, lifted up endlessly her eyes. They talked in the kitchen as she was cleaning up. "How come you to be so sure this here's my baby?" She was not crying now. "Don't you start a talking that way," she said. "Esther ain't in the habit of lying to nobody, and I ain't gone with so many men that I'm subject to get my mind confused." She was very cold and deliberate and moved about the kitchen with a furious concentration on her task, scarcely looking at him. He did not know what to say, how to reach her. "You tell your mother yet? You been to see a doctor? How come you be so sure?" She sighed. "No, I ain't told my mother. I ain't crazy. I ain't told nobody except you." "How come you be so sure if you ain't seen no doctor?" "What doctor in town you want me to go see? I go see a doctor, I might as well get up and shout it from the housetops. No, I ain't seen no doctor, and I ain't fixing to see one in a hurry. I don't need no doctor to tell me what's happening in my belly." "And how long you been knowing this?" "I've been knowing this for maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks now. 6 weeks? Why ain't you opened your mouth before? Because I wasn't sure. I thought I'd wait and make sure. I don't see no need for getting all up in the air before I knew. I didn't want to get you all upset and scared and evil like you is now, if it weren't no need. And you said this morning we were going to do something. What are we going to do? That's what we got to figure out now, Gabriel. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? He repeated at last and felt like the sustaining life had gone out of him. He sat down at the kitchen table and looked at the whirling pattern on the floor. But the life had not gone out of her. She came to where he sat, speaking softly with bitter eyes. You sound mighty strange to me. Don't look to me like you thinking of nothing about how you can get shut of this, and me too, quick as you know how. It wasn't always like that, was it, Reverend? Once upon a time, you couldn't think of nothing and nobody but me. What you thinking about tonight? I'd be damned if I think it's me you thinking of. Girl, don't talk like you ain't got good sense. You know I got a wife to think about. And he wanted to say more, but he could not find the words, and helplessly he stopped. I know that, she said with less heat, but watching him still with eyes from which the old impatient mockery was not entirely gone. But what I mean is, if you was able to forget her once, you ought to be able to forget her twice. He did not understand her at once, but then he sat up straight, his eyes wide and angry. What you mean, girl? What you trying to say? She did not flinch. Even in his despair and anger, he recognized how far she was from being the frivolous child she had always seemed to him. Or was it that she had been, in so short a space of time, transformed? But he spoke to her at this disadvantage, that whereas she was unprepared for any change in her, she had apparently taken his measure from the first and could be surprised by no change in him. You know what I mean, she said. You ain't never going to have no kind of life with that skinny black woman, and you ain't never going to be able to make her happy, and she ain't never going to have no children. I'd be blessed. Anyway, if I think you was in your right mind when you married her, and it's me that's going to have your baby. You want me to leave my wife and come with you? I thought, she answered, that you had done thought of that yourself already, many and many a time. You know, he said in halting anger, I ain't never said nothing like that. I ain't never told you I wanted to leave my wife.
That's a hard one to follow. As you can tell, I chose a children's book for a number of reasons. I like to describe myself as a creative storyteller who likes to tell hard stories. And I do that for a reason. My students and family pick at me that I like to make people cry. There's some truth to that, because when we can cry over other people's stories, that means we can connect to what they're feeling, even if we don't understand it. We can connect to what they are experiencing. And I like to say connect, not that we know what it's like, but we can connect to that experience. I grew up in a town where I was the only person who looked like me outside of my brother. Daughter of an immigrant mother from Korea and a black father in a town that had maybe 2 Asian families and black and white people, and that was it. And this was before the internet. So I didn't meet anyone who looked like me until I was in college. And it was very surreal. I was working out, looked over and saw a woman that looked just like me, and that was the first person I met that was Korean and black. I tell you that story because when looking for a book, I really connected to Tony Medina's reason for writing this book. He is a professor at Howard and is a black Puerto Rican professor who studied African American literature. And I'm going to share his introduction to this book before I read a couple excerpts. It's really interesting because these are very short, but his introduction really connected to me in this idea of representation and thinking about, as we look at these books that are banned or challenged, which I learned today, looking at what representation can mean for so many young minds. Langston Hughes' Selected Poems was one of the first poetry books I ever read. The cover had a photo of Langston sitting on the front of his typewriter, sitting in front of his typewriter, looking over his shoulder with a slight hesitating grin. It was the first brown face I'd ever seen looking out at me on the cover of a book, a face that reminded me of my face and the faces of my family. When I opened the book, a whole world of familiar voices and scenes came to life. Langston was painting my world with words, both plain spoken and lyrically sweet and sassy. Langston's Harlem was the Harlem of my father and grandmother, of my aunts and uncles. It was the first time poetry truly spoke to me about where I was from, in a language that was familiar, reminded me of the people in my neighborhood. I went on to read more books by Langston and books written about him. I learned how important he was to American literature in general and Black literature in particular. A poet of the people, Langston celebrated the beauty of Black life, and his poetry, plays, and short stories expressed his lifelong commitment to justice and equality. Langston was one of the first poets I read his poetry to jazz and to integrate jazz and the blues into his own poems. He was immediately embraced because his work was accessible and every word expressed his deep love of the people. This is the Langston I wish for you to meet in this book, which represents one of Harlem's poets' homage to another. Love to Langston captures glimpses of Langston's life in the art form he cherished most, poetry. It is the introduction to Langston's world through his voice, as I would imagine it, so that he comes to life speaking to you from yesterday and today, in here and now. The interesting thing about this book is there are facts in the very back of the book to correspond with the stories. So I'm going to read 3 short ones. The first one, libraries. I'm going to take you back to elementary school. Libraries are a special place for me, with their long tables all smooth and shiny and bookcases spilling over. With books filled with wonderful worlds, libraries are a special place for me to sit and stay with books and books and books of endless beautiful words, keeping me company, taking my loneliness and blues away. Woo! Little boy blues. Little boy, little boy, little boy blues. Why can't I go out to play little boy blues? Little boy, little boy, little boy blues, reading and dreaming and watching grandma snooze. The white kids chase me 'cause the color of my skin. Said the white kids chase me 'cause of my brown, brown skin. Little boy, little boy, little boy blues. Where's mama at and papa at, little boy blues? Why can't I go out to play too, little boy blues? And finally, I'm reading Grandma's Stories. This one is particularly amazing because a lot of us were raised by our grandmothers or they had an important place in our hearts, to include Langston as well. Grandma's Stories. Grandma has a head full of stories. She has a whole heart full of stories. All day long when Mama's away, Grandma wraps me in her special shawl and tells me her stories. Black people stolen from Africa into slavery, Black people with no rights working for free, Black slaves who escaped on the Underground Railroad, not a choo-choo train with a running engine, but Black folks and white folks working together to bring slaves from the South up north to freedom. Grandma fills me full of stories. She thrills me with her stories of how she is African, French, Cherokee, and how they tried to kidnap her into slavery. Grandma tells me her stories wrapped in her shawl that has its own story with its blood stains and bullet holes, and all from her husband who was killed with John Brown at Harper's Ferry. Oh, I know Grandma's stories are true. They didn't come from school or any book. Grandma was there fighting for freedom too.
I found this book at a book sale, library, and I've heard about it, and I thought, okay, it's time to read it. And I went home and I tried to read it, and I couldn't. It was too tough. I read the first, there was a lot of swearing, there was a lot of violence, and I thought, I can't read this book. Well, then Wanda gets a hold of me and said, you gotta talk here. And I said, well, I have a book I need to read, and I just haven't been able to do it, so I will do that. And go ahead and move to the next. I've outlined a couple of the characters, several of the characters. It's a very confusing book. There are about 1 million characters in this book. And the couple of pages I'm going to read to you just have, this is just part of them, but I wanted you to know who some of them were. Sorry. So Star Carter is the narrator. She's 16 years old. This is really a kind of a young person's book. But you have to have a tough young person. Her daddy used to be a drug dealer, went to prison, came back, and now is really a pillar of their community. He runs the grocery store. He knows everything that's going on. He helps hold the whole community together. Natasha is a 10-year-old friend who was killed in front of Star by a drive-by shooting. Khalil is a current friend since they were babies, and the part I'm going to read to you is Kahil and Star together. Some of the kids' names on a particular side of this family have weird names, and Seven is one of them. Seven is a half-brother to Star. Kenya is also a half-brother to Seven, but it's through different brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers. Chris is Star's white boyfriend. And the book is named after Tupac Shakur. The lyrics, Thug Life, which means the hate you give little infants, F's everyone. I'm abbreviating some of the words in this. So I'm going to read it to you, and then we'll talk just a little bit more about it. Garden Heights has been a battlefield for the past 2 months over some stupid territory wars. I was born a queen because Daddy used to be a king lord. And when he left the game, my street royalty status ended. But even if I'd known or grown up in it, I wouldn't understand fighting over a street, over streets that nobody owns. Gail drops the brush in the door and cranks up his stereo. They've been at a party. They're leaving because there's been gunfire. He cranks up the stereo, blasting an old rap song that Daddy's played 1 million times. I frown. Why are you always listening to that old stuff? Man, get out of here. Tupac was the truth. Yeah, 20 years ago. No, even now. Like, check this. He points at me, which means he's about to go into one of his Khalil philosophical moments. Pac said, Thug Life stood for the hate you give little infants, F's everyone. I raised my eyebrows. What? Listen, the hate you, the letter U, give little infants, F's everyone. Thug Life. Meaning what society give us as youth, it bites them in the ass when we wild out. Get it? Damn yeah. See, told you he was relevant. He nods to the beat and raps along. But now I'm wondering what he's doing to F everybody. As much as I think I know, I hope I'm wrong. I need to hear it from him. So why have you really been busy? I ask. A few months ago, Daddy said you quit the store. I haven't seen you since. He scoots closer to the steering wheel. Where you want me to take you? Your house or to the store? Khalil, your house or to the store? If you're selling that stuff, mind your business, Star. Don't worry about me. I'm doing what I got to do. B.S., you know my dad would help you out. He wipes his nose before he lies. I don't need help from nobody, okay? And that minimum wage job your pops gave me didn't make nothing happen. I got tired of choosing between lights and food. I thought your grandma was working. She was, and she got sick, and them clowns down at the hospital claimed they'd work with her. 2 months later, she couldn't pull her load on the job. Because when you're going through chemo, you can't pull big-ass garbage bins around. They fired her. He shakes his head. Funny, huh? The hospital fired her because she was sick. It's silent in the Impala except for Tupac asking, "Who do you believe in?" I don't know. My phone vibrates again, probably either Chris asking for forgiveness or Kenya asking for a friend backup. Instead, my big brother's all caps texts appear on the screen. I don't know why he does that. He probably thinks it intimidates me. Really, it annoys the hell out of me. Where are you? You and Kenya better not be at that party. I heard somebody got shot. The only thing worse than protective parents is protective older brothers. Even Black Jesus can't save me from 7. Khalil glances over at me. 7, huh? How'd you know? Because you always look like that when you want to punch something when he talks to you. Remember that time at your birthday party when he kept telling you what to wish for? And I popped him in the mouth. Then Natasha got mad at you for telling her boyfriend to shut up, Khalil says, laughing. I roll my eyes. She got on my nerves with her crush on 7. Half the time I thought she came over just to see him. No, it was because you had the Harry Potter movies, what we used to call ourselves the Hood Trio, tighter than the insides of Voldemort's nose. We were so silly for that. I know, right? We laugh at something's missing. Someone's missing. Natasha. Khalil looks at the road. Crazy, it's been 6 years. You know, a whoop whoop sound startles us, and blue lights flash in the rearview mirror. When I was 12, my parents had 2 talks with me. One was the usual, birds and bees. Well, I didn't really get the usual version. My mother, Lisa, is a registered nurse, and she told me what went where and what didn't need to go where, or any damn where, anywhere, until I'm grown. Back then, I doubted anything was going anywhere anyway. When all the other girls sprouted breasts between 6th and 7th grade, my chest was as flat as my back. The other talk was about what to do if a cop stopped me. Mama fussed and told Daddy I was too young for that. He argued that I was too young to get arrested. He argued I wasn't too young to get arrested or shot. Star, you do whatever they tell you to do, he said. Keep your hands visible. Don't make any sudden moves. Only speak when they speak to you. I knew it must have been serious. Daddy has the biggest mouth of anybody I know, and if he said to be quiet, I needed to be quiet. I hope somebody had that talk with Khalil. He cusses under his breath, turns Tupac down, and maneuvers the Impala to the side of the street. We're on Carnation, where most of the houses are abandoned and half the streetlights are busted. Nobody around but us and the cop. Khalil turns the ignition off. Wonder what this fool wants. The officer parks and puts his brights on. I blink to keep from being blinded. I remember something else Daddy said. If you're with somebody, you better hope they don't have nothing on them, or both of you are going down. Okay, you don't have anything in this car, do you? I ask. He watches the cop in his side mirror. No. The officer approaches the driver's door and taps the window. Khalil cranks the handle to roll it down. And as if we aren't blinded enough, the officer beams his flashlight in our faces. License, registration, proof of insurance. Khalil breaks a rule. He doesn't do what the cops want. What do you pull us over for? License, registration, and proof of insurance. I said, what do you pull us over for? Khalil, do what he said. Khalil groans and takes his wallet out. The officer follows his movements with the flashlight. My heart pounds loudly, but Daddy's instructions echo in my head. Get a good look at the cop's face. If you can remember his badge number, that's even better. With the flashlight following Khalil's hands, I make out the numbers on the badge. 115. He's white, mid-30s to early 40s, has brown buzz cut and a thin scar over his top lip. Khalil hands the officer his papers and license. 115 looks over them. Where are you two coming from tonight? None yet. Khalil says, meaning none of your business. What'd you pull me over for? Your taillight's broken. So you're going to give me a ticket or what? Khalil says. You know what? Get out the car, smart guy. Man, give me my ticket. Get out the car. Hands up where I can see him. Khalil gets out of the car with his hands up. 115 yanks him up by his arm and pins him against the back door. I fight to find my voice. He didn't mean hands on the dashboard. The officer barks at me. Don't move. I do what he tells me, but my hands are shaking too much to be still. He pats Khalil down. Okay, smart mouth, let's see what we find on you today. You ain't gonna find nothing, Khalil says. 115 pats him down 2 more times. He turns up empty. Stay here, he tells Khalil. And you, he looks in the window at me, don't move. The officer walks back to his patrol car. My parents haven't raised me to fear the police, just to be smart around them. They told me it's not smart to move while a cop has his back to you. Khalil does. He comes to the door. It's not smart to make a sudden move. Khalil does. He opens the driver's door. You okay, Star? Pow! One Khalil's body jerks. Blood spatters from his back. He holds on to the door to keep himself upright. Pow! 2. Khalil gasps. Pow! 3. Khalil looks at me, stunned. He falls to the ground. I'm 10 again, watching Natasha fall to the ground. An ear-splitting scream emerges from my gut, explodes my throat, and uses every inch of me to be heard. So the rest of the book, those are the first 2 chapters, in the first 2 chapters. And from there on, it is Star figuring out who she is, who she wants to be, how she can make a difference in people's lives. She lives one place, she goes to an expensive school in the next place. She tries to figure out who those people are. And it's her journey trying to come to an understanding, and she becomes an activist at the end. What was really strange is last night, this book has been turned into a movie, and I actually watched the movie, which was actually kind of good because there's so many people in this thing that I could finally keep everybody straight. So I would do both. Get the book, watch the movie, and see what you learn. I learned a lot just because it's a girl growing up in such a different place than I was used to. And that's why we read. Thank you.
People who know me know that I taught American literature about 150 years ago. And I taught The Grapes of Wrath most years to my 11th graders without ever really realizing the trail of controversy that this book had created when it was first published in 1939 by the Salinas, California author John Steinbeck. We don't think about, well, at least I didn't think about books being burned in this country in the 1930s. I ascribed that behavior to another country across the ocean, but there were civic leaders, elected officials, and just plain angry people in California among the agricultural elite who were burning this book. They were decrying it for its vulgar language. They were unhappy with the way California landowners were being portrayed as cruel. And then people across the United States said that this book was full of communist propaganda. I have two very short, I'm going to take far less than my 8 minutes. I have two very short passages to read to you. And I'm going to try to read them slowly because I have the time to read them slowly so that you can listen very carefully. The first one is the farewell speech of the character Tom Joad, who has just been released from prison, but he's gotten in trouble with the law again, and he's on the run, and he's saying goodbye to his mother. And he's referencing, when you hear the name Casey, he's referring to a Christ-like figure in the book named Preacher Casey. So that's who he's referring to. We talk a lot about words and images and speeches, aging well or not aging well. And this is a grim statement that I'm about to make, but I think that this has aged well. I think that it is grimly familiar even some 80 years later. I thought long and hard about how much or little to editorialize about what I'm going to read to you, and I'm going to err on the side of not editorializing a lot. I think that you're bright people, and you'll get the point of Tom Joad's farewell to his mother. And then an even shorter passage is Ma Joad herself. And when I grow weary at the news each and every passing day and wonder where we're headed, I like to think of Ma Joad's final speech because it gives me a little bit of encouragement. So this is Tom Joad's farewell speech. Well, maybe like Casey says, a fella ain't got a soul of his own, but only a piece of a big one. And then what, Tom? Asked his mother. Then it really don't matter. Then I'll be all around in the dark. I'll be everywhere, wherever you look. Whenever there's a fight so that hungry people can eat, I'll be there. Whenever there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there. If Casey knew, why, I'll be in the way guys yell when they're real mad, and I'll be in the way kids laugh when they're hungry and they know that supper's ready. And when our folks eat the stuff that they raise and live in the houses that they built, well, I'll be there too. And this is Ma Joad's final speech as the family are moving yet again in search of work. So Ma Joad says, rich fellas come up and they die. And their kids who ain't no good, they die out too. But we keep a-comin'. We're the people that live. They can't wipe us out. They can't lick us. We'll go on forever, Pa, because we're the people.
Hey, so I read The Color Purple by Alice Walker, Melissa Swindell with the Georgia Writers Museum. Alice was born and raised in the Writers Museum hometown of Edenton, Georgia. So we've had a chance to look at her work some and kind of her life and history there in the town. But I'm assuming we probably don't need a introduction to The Color Purple. Most people know the ending on that, so no spoilers. And then in my copy of the book, there's an epilogue where Alice talks about her writing. So I wanted to say that in her words rather than my own as we go through that. One of the things that struck me reading the book versus watching the movie or seeing the play was the theme of religion that goes throughout the book, and how striking it is in the novel, kind of in comparison to what you see on stage or on the screen. And so I'm going to start there with Alice's words in the epilogue. She wrote this in 2006, so almost 45 years ago. She says, "It still puzzles me that The Color Purple is so infrequently discussed as a book about God versus the God image. After all, the protagonist, Celi's, first words are, 'Dear God.'" So opening to the first chapter, Celi thinks to herself, "You better never tell nobody but God. It'd kill your Manny." Then she writes, "Dear God, I'm 14 years old. I've always been a good girl. Maybe you can give me a sign letting me know what is happening to me." Fast forwarding a little, after Sophia is arrested, Celi writes, "Dear God, me and Squeak don't say nothing. I don't know what she think, but I think about angels. God coming down by chariot, swinging down real low, and carrying old Sophia home. I see 'em all clear as day. Angels, all in white, white hair and white eyes. Look like albinos. God all white too, looking like some stout white man work at a bank. Angels strike the cymbals. One of them blow his horn, God blow out a big breath of fire, and suddenly, Sophia free." Then, as we go forward, Celi finds the letters that her sister Nettie has been writing. And Celi's second letter to Nettie, and this is probably the longest passage I'll read. "Dear Nettie, I don't write to God no more. I write to you." "What happened to God?" asked Shug. "Who that?" I say. She look at me serious. "Big a devil as you is," I say. "You not worried about no God?" "Surely." She say, "Wait a minute. Hold on just a minute here. Just because I don't harass it like some peoples we know, don't mean I ain't got religion. What God do for me?" I asked. She say, "Celi," like she's shocked. He gave you life, good health, and a good woman to love you to death." "Yeah," I say, "and he give me a lynch daddy, a crazy mama, a low-down dog of a steppaw, and a sister I probably won't ever see again. Anyhow," I say, "the God I've been praying and writing to is a man, and act just like all other men's I know, trifling, forgetful, and low down." She say, "Miss Celi, you better hush. God might hear you." "Let him hear me," I say. "If he ever listened to a poor colored woman, the world would be a different place, I can tell you." She talk and she talk, trying to budge me away from blasphemy, but I blaspheme much as I want to. "All my life, I never care what people thought about nothing I did," I say. "But deep in my heart, I care about God. What he going to think? And come to find out, he don't think. Just up there glorying and being deaf, I reckon. But it ain't easy trying to do without God. Even if you know he ain't there, trying to do without him is a strain." She say, "Celi, tell the truth. Have you ever found God in church?" "I never did. I found a bunch of folks hoping for him to show. Any God I ever felt in church, I brought it with me. And I think all the other folks did too. They come to church to share God, not find God. Some folks didn't have to share him to share," I say. "They the ones didn't speak to me while I was there struggling with my big belly and Mr. Children." Probably in the front row, right? "Right," she say. And then she say, "Tell me what your God looked like, Celi." "Okay," I say. "He big and old and tall and gray-bearded and white. He wear white robes and he go barefoot." "Blue eyes?" she asked. "Sorta bluish gray, cool, big though, white lashes," I say. She laughed. "Why you laugh?" I asked. "I don't think it's so funny. What do you expect him to look like, mister?" "That wouldn't be no improvement," she say. Then she told me this old white man is the same God she used to see when she prayed. "If you wait to find God in church, Celi," she say, "that's who is bound to show up, because that's where he live." "How come?" I asked. "Because that's the That the white folks, that's the one in the white folks' white Bible, Shug. Shug, I say, God wrote the Bible. White folks had nothing to do with it. How come he looked just like them then? Only bigger and a heap more hair. And how come the Bible, just like everything else they make, all about them, doing one thing and another, and all the color folks doing is getting cursed? I never thought about that. Ain't no way to read the Bible and not think God white, she say. Then she sigh. When I found out I thought God was white and a man, I lost interest. You mad because he don't seem to listen to your prayers. Do the mayor listen to anything color say? Ask Sophia, she say. But I don't have to ask Sophia. I know white people don't listen to color, period. If they do, they only listen long enough to be able to tell you what to do. Here's the thing, say Shug, the thing I believe. God is inside you and inside everyone else. You come into the world with God, but only them that search for it inside find it. And sometimes it just manifests itself even if you're not looking or don't know what you're looking for. Trouble do it for most folks, I think. Feeling like shit. It? I asked. Yeah, God ain't a he or a she, but a it. But what do it look like? I asked. It don't look like nothing, she say. It ain't a picture show. I ain't something you can look at apart from anything else, including yourself. I believe God is everything, say Shug. Everything that is, or ever was, or ever will be. And when you can feel that and be happy to feel that, you've found it. She say, my first step from the old white man was trees, then air, then birds, then other people. But one day, when I was sitting quiet and feeling like a motherless child, which I was, it come to me, that feeling of being a part of everything and not separate at all. I knew that if I cut a tree, my arm would bleed. Listen, God, love everything you love. And a mess of stuff you don't love. But more than anything else, God loves admiration. You saying God vain, I asked. Nah, she say, not vain, just wanting to share a good thing. I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it. What do it do when it pissed off, I asked. Oh, it makes something else. People think pleasing God is all God care about. But any fool living in the world can see it always trying to please us back. Yeah, I say. Yeah, she say. It always making little surprises and springing them on us when we least expect it. You mean it want to be loved, just like the Bible say? Yes, Celie, she say. Everything want to be loved. Us sing and dance, make faces, give flower bouquets, trying to be loved. You ever notice that trees do everything to get attention we do, except walk? Man corrupt everything, say Shug. He on your box of grits, in your head, and all over the radio. He try to make you think he everywhere. Soon as you think he everywhere, you think he God. But he ain't. Whenever you trying to pray, and man plop himself down on the other end of it, tell him to get lost, said Shug. Conjure up flowers, wind, water, a big rock. But this hard work, let me tell you, he had been there so long he don't want to budge. He threatened lightning, floods, and earthquakes. Us fight. I hardly pray at all. Every time I conjure up a rock, I throw it. Again, back to the epilogue that Alice wrote about her story. She says, think of Pa as Celie's tsunami and Mr. as her hurricane. In fact, a Pa and or a Mr. are likely to turn up in anybody's life. They might be wearing the mask of war, the mask of famine, the mask of physical affliction, the mask of caste, race, class, sex, mental illness, or disease. Their meaning to us often is that they are simply an offering, a challenge provided by God that requires us to grow, and though we may be confused, even traumatized, as Celie is, by their historical, social, and psychological configuration, if we persevere, we may, like her, eventually settle into amazement that by some unfathomable kindness, we have received just the right keys we need to unlock the deepest, darkest dungeons of our emotional and spiritual bondage and to experience our much longed for liberation and peace. Thank you all.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hi, my name's Andrea Wardlaw, and I chose the novel Native Son by Richard Wright. And the reason I chose this book, I've been meaning to read it for years. I read Richard Wright's memoir, Black Boy, a few years ago. And his writing is, I was drawn to his writing because of the way that he describes the mental and emotional toll that racism takes on a person. And this book is similar in that way. And one of the things that I think is incredibly interesting about it, the larger plot of the book is a bit predictable of how you would think a young Black boy committing a crime in 20th century America. It plays out exactly how you think it might. And he doesn't give you a perfect victim of a character to kind of interrogate the broader themes of racism in his life. So you have a criminal, you know, Bigger Thomas is not a very likable character, but I think what that does is it forces you to look at the system and the impacts of the system through the lens of, you know, he's not perfect, but he still is a human, and what are the conditions that created a Bigger Thomas. And kind of what I've taken from this book at the end of the day, racism is violence and poverty is violence. And of course, when you're put under those types of pressures, you produce people who do really desperate things. Yeah, so I want to read a piece from the beginning of the book that I think really sets up kind of the whole premise of the rest of the novel. In this scene, Bigger is talking to his friend Gus, who's a part of they're in like a little bit of a criminal gang. They rob people in the Black community, and they're kind of thinking about escalating their crimes a little bit to rob a white person. And they're sitting outside of a bar and having a conversation. So after a bit, they relaxed and leaned back against the wall, smoking. Bigger saw Gus cup his left hand to his ear as though holding a telephone receiver and cup his right hand to his mouth as though talking into a transmitter. "Hello?" Gus said. "Hello," Bigger said. "Who's this?" "This is Mr. J.P. Morgan speaking," Gus said. "Yes, sir, Mr. Morgan," Bigger said, his eyes filled with mock adulation and respect. "I want you to sell 20,000 shares of U.S. Steel in the market this morning," Gus said. "At what price, sir?" Bigger asked. Just dump them at any price," Gus said, with casual irritation. "We're holding too much." "Yes, sir," Bigger said. "And call me at the club at 2 this afternoon and tell me if the president telephoned," Gus said. "Yes, sir, Mr. Morgan," Bigger said. Both of them made gestures signifying that they were hanging up the telephone receivers. Then they bent doubled, laughing. "I bet that's just the way they talk," Gus said. "I wouldn't be surprised," said Bigger. They were silent again. Presently, Bigger cupped his hand to his mouth and spoke through an imaginary telephone transmitter. "Hello?" "Hello," Gus answered. "Who's this?" "This is the President of the United States speaking," Bigger said. "Oh, yes, sir, Mr. President," Gus said. "I'm calling a cabinet meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock, and you, as Secretary of State, must be there." "Well, now, Mr. President," Gus said, "I'm pretty busy. They raisin sand over there in Germany, and I gotta send them a note. But this is important," Bigger said. "What you going to take up at this cabinet meeting?" Gus said. "Well, you see, the niggers is raising sand over the country," Bigger said, struggling to keep back his laughter. "We've got to do something with these Black folks." "Oh, if it's about the niggers, I'll be right there," Mr. President, Gus said. They hung up the imaginary receiver and leaned against the wall and laughed. A streetcar rattled by. Bigger sighed, swore. "God damn it, what's the matter? They don't let us do nothing." "Who?" "The white folks." "You talk like you just now finding that out," Gus said. "Nah, but I just can't get used to it," Bigger said. "I swear to God, I can't. I know I oughtn't to think about it, but I can't help it. Every time I think about it, I feel like somebody's poking a red-hot iron down my throat." "God damn it, look." We live here and they live there. We black and they white. They got things we ain't. They do things we can't. It's just like living in jail. Half the time, I feel like I'm on the outside of the world peeping in through a knothole in the fence. Ain't no use in feeling that way about it. It don't help none, said Gus. You know one thing, Bigger? Bigger said, what? Sometimes I feel like something awful is going to happen to me. Bigger spoke with a tinge of bitter pride in his voice. What you mean? Gus asked, looking at him quickly. There was fear in his eyes. I don't know. I just feel that way. Every time I get to thinking about me being black and they being white, me being here and they being there, I feel like something awful is going to happen to me. For Christ's sakes, there ain't nothing you can do about it. How come you want to worry yourself? You black and they make the laws. Why they make us live in one corner of the city? Why don't they let us fly planes and run ships? Gus hunched Bigger with his elbow and mumbled good-naturedly, "Aw, nigger, quit thinking about it. You'll go nuts." The plane was gone from the sky, and the white plumes of floating smoke were thinly spread, vanishing because he was restless and had time on his hands. Bigger yawned and again hoisted his arms high above his head. Nothing ever happens, he complained. What you mean? What do you want to what do you want to happen? Anything, Bigger said, with a wide sweep of his dingy palm, a sweep that included all the possible activities of the world. Then their eyes were riveted. A slate-colored pigeon swooped down to the middle of the steel car tracks and began strutting to and fro with ruffled feathers, its fat neck bobbing with regal pride. A streetcar rumbled forward, and the pigeon rose swiftly through the air on wings stretched so taut and sheer that Bigger could see the gold of the sun through their translucent tips. He tilted his head and watched the slate-colored bird flap and wheel out of sight over the edge of a high roof. Now, if I could do that, Bigger said. Gus laughed. You're nuts. I reckon we the only things in the city that can't go where we want to go, do what we want to do. I reckon we the only... I don't think about it, Gus said. I can't help it. That's why you feel like something awful is going to happen to you, Gus said. You think too much. What in the hell can a man do? Bigger asked, turning to Gus. Get drunk and sleep it off. I can't. I'm broke. Bigger crushed a cigarette and took out another one and offered the package to Gus. They continued smoking. A huge truck swept past, lifting scraps of white paper into the sunshine. The bit settled down slowly. Gus, huh? You know where the white folks live? Yeah, Gus said, pointing eastward over across the line over there on George Cotton Grove Avenue. Nah, they don't, Bigger said. What you mean? Gus asked, puzzled. Then where do they live? Bigger doubled his fist and struck his solar plexus right down here in my stomach, he said. Gus looked at Bigger searchingly, then away, as though ashamed. Yeah, I know what you mean, he whispered. Every time I think of them, I feel them, Bigger said. Yeah, and in your chest and throat too, Gus said. It's like fire. And sometimes you can't hardly breathe. Bigger's eyes were wide and placid, gazing into space. That's when I feel like something awful is going to happen to me. Bigger paused, narrowed his eyes. Nah, it ain't like something's going to happen to me. It's like I was going to do something I can't help. Yeah, Gus said, with uneasy eagerness. His eyes were full of a look compounded of fear and admiration for Bigger. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like you going to fall and don't know where you're going to land. Gus's voice trailed off. The sun slid behind a big white cloud, and the street was plunged in cool shadow. Quickly, the sun edged forth again, and it was bright and warm once more. A long, sleek black car, its fenders glinting like glass in the sun, shot past them at high speed and turned a corner a few blocks away. Bigger pursed his lips and sang, zoom. They got everything, Gus said. They own the world, Bigger said. What the hell, said Gus. Let's go in the pool room. Okay. They walked toward the door of the pool room. Say, you taking that job you told us about? Gus asked. I don't know. You talk like you don't want to. Oh, hell, yes, I want the job, Bigger said. They looked at each other and laughed. They went inside.
I want to say thank you to all of you for being here, and also to our readers who volunteered to be part. And I wonder if we could have all of them come up and stand on the platform or right in front of it, just so that we can say thank you one more time. Say thank you.